A relentless, torrential rainstorm hammered down upon the remote African landscape, turning the usually dusty earth into a swirling, treacherous mire. Visibility was almost non-existent, the world reduced to a blur of gray and green under the furious assault of the sky. Through this chaotic deluge, a lone, weary figure moved with a slow, deliberate purpose. It was a dog, its once vibrant coat now matted and darkened by the downpour, its silhouette barely discernible against the deepening twilight. The ancient, gnarled baobab tree offered little solace, its broad trunk providing scant shelter from the sheets of water that seemed intent on washing the very world clean. Still, the dog pressed himself against it, head bowed, an island of quiet endurance amidst the storm's fury. This was Buster, an aging German shepherd whose years were etched not just in the silvering muzzle and stiff gait, but in the profound wisdom held within his amber eyes. He was a creature of remarkable history, a veteran of countless rescues and dangerous missions. Originally hailing from the sprawling plains of the United States, Buster had once served with distinction as a search and rescue dog, his keen nose and unwavering loyalty saving lives from collapsed buildings and lost wilderness trails. His days of active duty, however, were long past. Now, Buster lived out his retirement on a sprawling wildlife conservation reserve in a sub-Saharan African country, a place where the wild heart of the continent beat strong and untamed. His existence here was one of quiet dignity, a gentle rhythm of patrolling the perimeter with the rangers, occasionally guiding new recruits, and mostly simply being. He'd traded the adrenaline of shattered concrete and snow-swept mountains for the humid air and the distant cries of elephants, a peaceful transition into his golden years. His slower pace was a testament to his age, but the intelligence and dedication that had defined his youth still glimmered beneath the surface, an unextinguished flame. The storm, however, was far from peaceful. It raged with an almost primeval intensity, each thunderclap a cannon shot across the vast plains, each gust of wind a physical blow. Despite the cacophony, despite the relentless assault on his senses, Buster felt a distinct unease begin to prickle at the back of his mind. It was an instinct, honed over years of anticipating disaster and sensing distress long before any human could. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed vegetation, suddenly seemed to carry something else, something subtle but deeply unsettling. Then it came again, a faint, distressed cry, piercing through the wind and rain. It was a sound he knew, yet in this context, it was utterly out of place. It was not the familiar plaintive call of a lost antelope calf, nor the warning shriek of a bird. This sound was raw, vulnerable, and unmistakably a call for help. An unusual sound that stirred something deep within the old dog, an echo of his past purpose, a flickering ember of his search and rescue days. His ears, despite their age, swiveled, trying to pinpoint the source of the faint, almost swallowed by the storm sound. The cry, barely audible, spoke of profound fear and desperation, qualities Buster recognized instantly. His body, stiff and aching from the cold and damp, tensed, his head lifted, eyes narrowed against the driving rain, scanning the turbulent landscape. The storm intensified its assault, but the cry held a stronger sway over him than any meteorological fury. It was a summons he instinctively understood, a silent plea that transcended species and age. The quiet dignity of his retirement was suddenly, jarringly interrupted. Before we delve deeper into Buster's extraordinary discovery, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Join our community for more heartwarming stories of animal rescues and incredible bonds that defy expectation. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Buster, his once powerful legs now stiff with age, pushed himself forward, each step a deliberate act of will against the churning mud and the relentless assault of the rain. The faint cries, still echoing in the tumultuous air, seemed to pull him onward, a primal call that bypassed his weariness and settled deep in his old bones. His breath hitched in his chest, a ragged sound lost amidst the storm's fury, but he pressed on, his nose low to the sodden ground, occasionally lifting his head to pinpoint the direction of the distress. The terrain was unforgiving, a tangled labyrinth of thorny bushes and slick, unseen roots that threatened to trip him at every turn. Water streamed down his thick fur, matting it to his skin, and his keen sense of smell was dulled by the overwhelming scent of wet earth and bruised foliage. He knew this wilderness. He had patrolled its borders countless times during his active years, always with a human handler, always with a clear mission. But now, it was just him, an old dog driven by an instinct he hadn't felt so strongly in years. The urgency of the sound overrode any innate caution, any residual fear of the unknown lurking in the darkened undergrowth. He was aware of the dangers, the lurking predators, the venomous snakes, the sheer vastness of the untamed land. But the sound, that heartbreaking, persistent plea, was louder than any warning bell. It was a sound he knew from his past, a sound that always meant vulnerability, helplessness, a life in peril. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a short, arduous trek, the landscape opened slightly into a small, waterlogged clearing beneath a cluster of ancient trees. And there, revealed by a flicker of lightning that briefly illuminated the scene with an eerie, stark clarity, was the source of the cries. Huddled miserably, barely visible against the dark, wet earth, was a tiny leopard cub. Its fur, still soft and spotted, was plastered to its shivering form, and its plaintive wails were now undeniably visible, emanating from a mouth too small to hold such profound sorrow. Beside it, tragically still, lay its mother. The large, majestic leopardess was sprawled awkwardly, her magnificent body tragically marred. Buster's sharp eyes, despite the dim light and his own age, immediately registered the grim details, the tight, cruel wire of a poacher's snare still clinging to her hind leg, a silent testament to the brutal end she had met. The sight brought a fresh wave of despair, a stark reminder of the human cruelty that so often touched this beautiful, dangerous land. The cub, oblivious to the concept of irreversible loss, continued to nuzzle frantically at its mother's unresponsive flank, letting out those heart-wrenching, unanswered cries. Buster paused, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest, not of aggression, but of profound sorrow and a dawning understanding of the gravity of the situation. Every instinct, every genetic predisposition screamed that this was a predator, a natural enemy, a creature he should instinctively avoid, or, in a different context, confront. Yet his years of training, of being taught to protect and to serve, immediately overrode these ancient impulses. He saw not a future threat, but a helpless, orphaned child, his inherent gentle nature honed by countless rescue missions where he had approached terrified victims with calm reassurance, now surfaced. He approached slowly, carefully, his body language deliberately non-threatening. He lowered his head, his ears slightly back, a silent communication of peace. The cub, momentarily distracted from its desperate attempts to rouse its mother, flinched, its small head snapping up, wide emerald eyes locking onto Buster. Fear, raw and untamed, flickered in their depths, but beneath it, a desperate, fading glimmer of hope. With a soft, almost imperceptible nudge of his wet nose, Buster tried to comfort the tiny leopard cub. The gesture was tentative, born of instinct and an innate understanding of vulnerability, a stark contrast to the rough and tumble world he had known in his prime. The cub, a trembling bundle of spotted fur, flinched initially, its small body stiffening against the cold, relentless rain. Its eyes, wide and luminous with terror, darted from Buster's weathered face to the still form of its mother, a silent testament to the recent tragedy that had befallen it. A low, mournful whimper escaped the cub's throat, a sound that twisted Buster's aging heart. He lowered his head further, letting his warm breath wash over the cub, a silent promise of safety in a world that had suddenly turned hostile. Slowly, hesitantly, the cub responded. Perhaps it was the sheer exhaustion, the biting cold, or the unmistakable warmth emanating from Buster's shaggy fur. But it shifted, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and then, with a surprising surge of trust, it leaned into Buster's side. Its small, fragile body, still trembling, found solace in the unexpected embrace. Buster remained still, a silent sentinel against the storm, allowing the cub to draw what little comfort it could from his presence. The extraordinary interaction unfolded amidst the continuing downpour, each raindrop a cold, hard reminder of their precarious existence. The wind howled through the skeletal trees, and the river, swollen and turbulent, roared its disapproval. Yet in their small, shared space, an unlikely bond began to solidify, forged in the crucible of loss and desperation. A sense of urgent clarity washed over Buster, despite his weariness. The cub could not survive here alone. Not in this storm, not in this wilderness, not without its mother's protection. Every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed at him to act. The cold reality of their situation pressed in. The nearest human settlement or ranger station was a daunting distance away, potentially several miles of treacherous, rain-soaked terrain. For an old dog, his joints aching and his strength waning, the prospect of navigating such a journey was daunting enough. But to do so while protecting, or, even more challenging, transporting a fragile leopard cub, it seemed an almost impossible task. Yet, the small, trusting weight against his side ignited a fierce resolve within him. He faced the impossible task of preserving this fragile life, a tiny spark of existence clinging precariously to the edge of oblivion. He nudged the cub again, this time with a clearer purpose, a gentle insistence. He needed to get it moving, to find shelter, to find help. He whimpered softly, a low, reassuring rumble deep in his chest, trying to encourage the cub to follow him, to leave the grim scene behind. But the cub, still weak from shock and exposure, was resistant. It was a creature of instinct, and its most fundamental instinct was to remain with its mother, even in death. It huddled closer to the deceased leopardess, a heart-wrenching display of loyalty and grief. Buster tried another approach. Carefully, with painstaking slowness, he attempted to scoop the cub up, to carry it away from the danger. He opened his mouth, his powerful jaws, once capable of formidable bites, now surprisingly gentle as they tried to encircle the cub's small frame. But the cub was heavier than it looked, and its terror, combined with its resistance, made it difficult. It wriggled, a tiny bundle of protest, refusing to be moved. Progress was agonizingly slow, each failed attempt a fresh wave of despair for the old dog. The cub was too frightened to comply fully, making their escape an increasingly difficult and perilous endeavor. He knew he couldn't leave it, and he knew he couldn't stay. The dilemma loomed large, a terrifying chasm between his intention and the cruel reality of their circumstances. As Buster attempted to move the cub, the relentless storm, as if to test their resilience further, brought forth new, escalating dangers. A sudden, terrifying crescendo of thunder cracked overhead, immediately followed by the roar of churning water. The ground beneath them, saturated and unstable, shifted violently. A flash flood, a common and deadly occurrence in these deluged landscapes, surged through the low-lying areas, trapping them momentarily against a rapidly rising current. Buster, his instinct seizing control, reacted with astonishing speed for an animal of his age. He scrambled desperately, urging the cub with frantic nudges and soft, urgent grumbles to higher ground. He found a small, rocky outcrop, barely elevated above the swirling brown water, and pushed the cub behind it. Then, with a profound act of selfless protection, he positioned his own aging body as a shield, hunkering down, covering the terrified cub with his bulk, absorbing the brunt of the wind and rain. The water swirled angrily around his legs, threatening to sweep them both away, but Buster held firm, a living bulwark against the raging elements. He remained constantly vigilant, his keen senses on high alert for any other predators that might be drawn by the scent of a vulnerable, distressed cub, or indeed, by the scent of his own tired body. The wilderness was unforgiving, and peril lurked in every shadow, every rustle of leaves. The physical strain of the ordeal was beginning to tell on Buster. His strength, once legendary in his search and rescue days, waned visibly with each passing minute. His breathing became heavy and labored, a rasping sound against the roar of the storm. His legs, usually so steady and powerful, trembled uncontrollably beneath him, threatening to collapse at any moment. Every joint in his body screamed in protest, a constant dull ache that intensified with every step, every protective crouch. The sheer physical exertion alone was immense, but the emotional toll of the situation weighed equally heavily on him. He felt the cub's small, fragile body shivering against his, a raw, undeniable testament to its dire situation. He was acutely aware of his own limitations, the undeniable truth that he was an old dog, far from the prime of his life. A deep, almost guttural sigh escaped him, a sound laden with the burden of his impossible task. He knew the odds were stacked against them. Failure meant a swift, cruel end for the tiny leopard. Just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, a flicker of memory, a faint echo from his past, pierced through the fog of exhaustion. He remembered a seldom-used ranger patrol route, a winding, overgrown track that cut through this very section of the wilderness. It was a route he had scent-marked countless times during his active service, a path known only to a few, a shortcut or an emergency detour for the rangers. It was dangerous, certainly, even in good weather, but it represented a possibility, a slim thread of hope. It was a deviation from his current, futile attempts to move the cub directly, a calculated risk born of desperation. He made an immediate, resolute decision. He would risk a detour, hoping against hope to intercept a patrol, or at the very least, find a more direct, albeit perilous, path to safety, to human intervention. He nudged the cub again, this time with a renewed sense of purpose, a silent promise that he wouldn't give up, not now, not ever. The cub, sensing the shift in his protector's demeanor, stirred, its tiny eyes blinking up at the German shepherd, an unspoken trust passing between them in the heart of the storm. They would face this new challenge together. The dilemma loomed large, a terrifying chasm between his intention and the cruel reality of their circumstances. Buster, however, was not one to succumb to despair. Driven by an unyielding sense of purpose, a deeply ingrained instinct to protect, He used his remaining strength to navigate the treacherous route. The storm, though still persistent, had lessened its fury slightly, offering a fleeting reprieve. He nudged the cub again, more firmly this time, guiding it away from the grim scene of its mother's demise and towards a slightly less exposed path. Each step was a monumental effort for Buster, his muscles protesting, his old bones aching with every movement over the uneven, rain-slicked ground. Yet, the image of the tiny, shivering form beside him fueled his resolve. He emitted soft whimpers, low, guttural sounds meant to reassure and encourage, letting the cub know he was there, a protector in a world suddenly turned hostile. The cub, though still weak and occasionally faltering, appeared to trust Buster implicitly. It stumbled, whimpered, but always managed to follow, a small, striped shadow clinging to the warmth and safety Buster offered. They moved slowly, painstakingly, through the dense undergrowth and over slippery rocks, Buster constantly scanning their surroundings. The wilderness was alive with dangers, even beyond the storm-swollen rivers and perilous terrain. He knew the scents, the sounds, the subtle shifts in the air that signaled a predator. His ears swiveled, always listening, always vigilant. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant cry, put him on high alert. He positioned himself strategically, always keeping his body between the vulnerable cub and any perceived threat, a silent shield against the harsh realities of the African night. The cub, sensing his unwavering protection, seemed to draw strength from his presence, occasionally pressing its small head against Buster's flank as if seeking constant reassurance. Despite his outward display of unwavering determination, Buster battled a fierce internal conflict. His energy was undeniably fading, a slow, inevitable drain. The gnawing fear that he might fail, that this tiny life he had sworn to protect might slip away despite his best efforts, was a heavy burden. He was an old dog, past his prime, and the physical demands of this impromptu rescue operation were immense. Memories of his past rescues, both the triumphs where he had pulled survivors from rubble, and the agonizing failures where life had been snatched away despite his valiant attempts, flashed through his mind. Each memory, whether of success or sorrow, served to stoke the embers of his resolve. He would not let this small, innocent life perish on his watch. He had seen too much, fought too hard, to give up now. This cub, this fragile embodiment of hope, deserved a chance. As they reached a slightly elevated clearing, offering a brief respite from the relentless climb, Buster knew he had to do something more. They needed human intervention, and quickly. The cub, exhausted, curled up against his side, its breathing shallow. Buster gently nudged it into a more sheltered position between two large roots, ensuring it was as safe as possible for a moment. Then, with a deep breath that pulled at his weary lungs, he let out a sound unlike his usual reserved demeanor. It was a series of barks and howls, each one a desperate raw plea that tore through the rain-soaked air. These were not the sharp, assertive barks of a guard dog, nor the playful yips of a pet. These were distress calls, primal and full of urgency, hoping against hope to be heard by human ears, to cut through the vast, indifferent wilderness. His powerful voice, though strained, carried surprisingly far in the damp air, a beacon of desperate hope in the endless night. He howled again, a sustained, mournful cry, then a staccato burst of barks, a rhythmic pattern that had once signaled discovery to his human partners back in his search and rescue days. He hoped, he prayed, that someone, somewhere, would recognize the plea for what it was and come to their aid. The dilemma loomed large, a terrifying chasm between his intention and the cruel reality of their circumstances. and Buster felt the weight of it in his very bones. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible mechanical hum vibrated through the sodden earth, cutting through the persistent roar of the storm. It was a sound entirely out of place in this wild, untamed landscape, a sound that stirred a flicker of desperate hope within the old dog. He lifted his head, ears swiveling, trying to pinpoint its origin. The hum grew steadily louder, a distant throbbing pulse that promised salvation or perhaps an entirely new threat. It was the unmistakable sound of a patrol vehicle, cutting through the dense foliage, its engine straining against the mud and rain-slicked terrain. Buster's tired body seemed to find a hidden reservoir of energy. His barks, initially ragged and weak from exhaustion, grew in urgency and volume, a desperate plea carried on the wind. He barked with all the strength he had left, a series of sharp, persistent calls designed to penetrate the storm's cacophony and grab the attention of anyone within earshot. He knew this sound meant humans, and humans meant help, not just for him, but for the tiny, vulnerable life huddled beside him. He shifted his weight, nudging the cub gently, as if to say, "Hold on, help is coming." The cub, startled by the sudden increase in Buster's vocalizations, whimpered, but remained close, its small form a testament to the old dog's unwavering protection. The patrol vehicle, a sturdy, mud-splattered jeep, finally broke through a screen of thick bushes, its headlights piercing the gloom. Two seasoned rangers, faces grim from the relentless downpour and the ever-present dangers of their patrol, were inside. Elias, the younger but equally experienced ranger, was behind the wheel, his eyes scanning the treacherous path. Beside him, old Jomo, a veteran of countless patrols and a man who knew the bush intimately, suddenly held up a hand. "Stop, Elias," he commanded, his voice barely audible over the engine. "Did you hear that? Canine distress, but different." As the jeep lurched to a halt, the rangers strained their ears, and then they heard it clearly. Buster's urgent, unceasing barks, unusually persistent for a lone dog in such conditions. Jomo, his brow furrowed with concern, grabbed his powerful spotlight and swept it across the waterlogged landscape. The beam cut through the rain, illuminating a sight that made both men gasp. There, under the partial shelter of a fallen tree, was an old German shepherd, clearly exhausted but bristling with protective instinct, standing guard over what appeared to be a very young leopard cub. "Good heavens," Elias breathed, his voice laced with disbelief. "What in the name of all that's wild?" Jomo's seasoned eyes quickly took in the scene. He saw the deceased leopardess lying nearby, a grim testament to the harsh realities of the wild and the clear signs of Buster's long vigil. The old dog's fur was matted with mud and rain, his frame gaunt, yet his stance was unwavering, a fierce loyalty emanating from him. They approached slowly, cautiously, not wanting to spook either animal. Jomo, with years of experience reading animal behavior, recognized the extraordinary bond that had somehow formed between the two disparate creatures. He saw not just a dog and a cub, but a protector and the protected, bound by an invisible thread of courage and compassion. "It seems we have a hero here, Elias," Jomo murmured, his voice softening. "And a very lucky cub." They parked the vehicle at a safe distance and disembarked, moving with quiet, deliberate steps. As they drew closer, Buster's barks subsided, replaced by a low, rumbling growl, a warning to these new arrivals. But it was a growl tinged with relief, a desperate plea finally answered. The rangers, understanding the delicate situation, spoke in soft, reassuring tones, their movements slow and deliberate. They quickly assessed the situation, their professional eyes noting the signs of a struggle: the deceased leopardess, the tiny, shivering cub, and the utterly exhausted but triumphant Buster. The cub, now more visible in the Jeep's powerful lights, was a fragile, pathetic bundle of spotted fur, trembling uncontrollably. Its eyes, wide with fear, darted between Buster and the approaching humans. Jomo slowly bent down, offering a gloved hand to Buster, who sniffed it cautiously before allowing a tentative touch. The old dog's gaze, however, remained fixed on the cub, a silent command for its continued safety. Elias, meanwhile, moved to examine the deceased leopardess, confirming their suspicions of poacher involvement. The grim discovery only underscored the urgency and the incredible nature of Buster's actions. This was not just a rescue. It was a testament to an extraordinary interspecies bond forged in the crucible of a violent storm and profound loss. The Rangers exchanged a look, a shared understanding of the sheer improbability and profound beauty of what they were witnessing. This old German shepherd had not only found a crying leopard cub in the rain, but had steadfastly protected it against all odds until help arrived. The Rangers, with a blend of awe and urgency, moved quickly to secure the scene. Elias, after a solemn examination of the deceased leopardess, confirmed the tragic reality of poaching, a constant shadow lurking over the African wilderness. Jomo, meanwhile, carefully approached Buster and the cub. He knew that after such an ordeal, both animals would be in a state of extreme stress and vulnerability. With practiced movements, the Rangers gently placed the shivering leopard cub into a specially prepared, climate-controlled transport box, lined with soft blankets. The cub, still trembling, let out a tiny sniffle, but the proximity of Buster, who had now been coaxed into the back of the patrol vehicle, seemed to offer some strange comfort. Buster, his body racked with fatigue but his spirit still resolute, watched every move. Once the cub was safely tucked away, Jomo turned his attention to the old dog. A flask of fresh water was offered, which Buster lapped at greedily, his parched throat finally receiving relief. A high-protein energy bar, usually reserved for Rangers during long patrols, was next, devoured with a hunger that spoke of his extended ordeal. As Jomo tended to Buster's minor cuts and scrapes, a testament to his arduous trek through the treacherous terrain, the Ranger couldn't help but marvel at the old German shepherd's resilience. Every stiff joint, every matted patch of fur, told a story of unwavering dedication. The compassion emanating from Buster was almost palpable, a silent promise of protection he had kept even against animals instinctually meant to be adversaries. The journey to the nearest wildlife sanctuary was a cautious one, the patrol vehicle navigating the still slick roads with care. The cub, despite its initial fear, seemed to sense the change in its fortunes, settling into a fitful slumber, occasionally stirring with a soft cry. Buster, ever vigilant, lay curled beside the transport box, his nose occasionally nudging the mesh, a low rumble emanating from his chest, a sound more akin to a purr than a growl, a steady reassurance to the tiny creature within. The Rangers observed this extraordinary companionship with quiet respect, understanding that they were not merely transporting animals, but fragile lives bound by an inexplicable thread of courage and an act of profound selflessness. Upon arrival at the sanctuary, the immediate bustling activity could have easily overwhelmed the cub, but Buster's steady presence seemed to anchor it. The sanctuary's lead veterinarian, Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman renowned for her calm demeanor and exceptional skill with wild animals, was waiting. Her eyes, usually reserved, widened in disbelief as she heard the full account of Buster's heroism. She carefully examined the cub, her hands moving with expert precision. Her initial report was grim but hopeful. Severe dehydration, malnourishment, and significant trauma from exposure, yet no major injuries, and crucially, a will to live. Buster's timely intervention, she declared, looking at the old dog with profound respect, is the only reason this little one has a fighting chance. The story of the old dog and the leopard cub spread like wildfire among the sanctuary staff. Whispers of the hero dog and the leopard's guardian followed Buster as he was led to a quiet corner where he could rest while remaining within sight of the cub's recovery ward. Even in his exhaustion, he refused to be completely separated from the small leopard. The sanctuary, usually a place of organized chaos, was filled with a new kind of energy, a quiet reverence for the remarkable event that had unfolded. Buster, unaware of the profound impact he was having, simply rested, his eyes still occasionally drifting towards the cub's enclosure, a silent testament to his enduring commitment. The immediate dangers were past, but the journey towards full recovery for the tiny leopard was just beginning, a journey Buster intended to be a part of every step of the way. The leopard cub, now given the poignant name Hope by the sanctuary staff, slowly but surely began her arduous recovery within the sterile yet comforting confines of the veterinary clinic. Her initial days were a delicate dance between survival and succumbing to the trauma and starvation she had endured. Dehydration and malnutrition had taken a severe toll, leaving her body weak and her spirit fragile. Yet, with every intravenous drip, every carefully measured feeding, and every gentle touch from the dedicated veterinary team, Hope's tiny spark of life grew stronger. Buster, having been thoroughly examined and treated for his own exhaustion and minor abrasions, refused to leave her side. He seemed to understand, with an almost human empathy, the cub's need for a familiar presence amidst the array of new smells and unfamiliar faces. His presence offered an invaluable sense of security to the orphaned cub. During those early, critical days, when Hope was still too weak to move much, Buster would lie patiently beside her enclosure, his soft snores a rhythmic comfort. When she was able to lift her head, her wary eyes would always seek out his reassuring form. The bond, forged in the terror of the storm and the despair of loss, deepened with each passing hour. As Hope gradually gained strength, her playful, innate leopard instincts began to emerge. She would bat playfully at Buster's nose through the bars of her enclosure, her tiny paws still too weak for any real force, but her intentions clear. Buster, in turn, would respond with gentle nudges, his tail wagging softly, a silent communication of encouragement and affection. The scene of the old German shepherd and the recovering leopard cub quickly became a powerful symbol within the sanctuary, a daily reminder of the extraordinary capacity for compassion that exists across species. It was a testament to resilience, illustrating how life, even after unimaginable hardship, finds a way to blossom anew. The once gaunt cub, now visibly plumper and more active, began to resemble the magnificent creature she was destined to become. Her spots, once dulled by illness, now glistened, and her movements gained a feline grace. Eventually, as Hope grew stronger and her health stabilized, she was moved to a larger, outdoor enclosure designed to mimic her natural habitat, albeit with the necessary safety and monitoring. Buster, ever her faithful guardian, was allowed supervised access, and their interactions blossomed into something truly heartwarming. The video culminates with these joyous scenes. Hope, now a robust and inquisitive young leopard, pouncing playfully at Buster's tail, her innate predatory instincts playfully honed on her aging canine friend. Buster, with the wisdom of his years, would tolerate her antics with a patient dignity, occasionally offering a gentle lick to her head or a playful paw to encourage her. Their improbable bond became a profound symbol of compassion, resilience, and the sheer, unadulterated power of interspecies connection. This was not just a touching story. It was a living testament that true heroism knows no bounds of species or age, demonstrating that even in the face of profound loss and danger, kindness and courage can bridge the widest divides. The story of Buster and Hope resonated deeply with everyone who encountered it, spreading far beyond the sanctuary's gates. Their unique friendship served as a beacon of hope, reminding us all of the inherent goodness that exists in the world, often in the most unexpected places. It underscored the vital importance of protecting our planet's wild inhabitants and supporting the dedicated individuals and organizations who work tirelessly to conserve them. This extraordinary tale, a powerful saga of an old dog's unwavering devotion, a tiny cub's fight for survival, and the profound connection that transcended their very natures, will forever be etched in the annals of incredible animal narratives, inspiring countless others to look with new eyes upon the creatures with whom we share this precious earth. We encourage you to share this inspiring story, to like this video, and to subscribe to our channel for more content celebrating the incredible spirit of animals and the unbreakable bonds they form. And remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples that change lives, just as Buster's heroic intervention changed Hope's. Support wildlife conservation efforts. Their future and ours depends on it.